Hey everyone, Lauren from A Girl and Her Wool here. So today we're in my kitchen. We're going to be dyeing some yarn. So I have skeins of my BFL sock base soaking. I have my dyes. I have everything set up, water boiling, and so we're going to dye some one-of-a-kind skeins. I love doing sessions like this. It's really fun to just take the pressure off and dye some yarn without worrying about it coming out exactly right. It's a good way for me to just practice techniques and play around with the different colors. It's starting to boil. Play around with techniques. I have some new colored dyes that I've started to play around with, but it's just a good opportunity to see how they interact together, and just go from there. So again, I have 3 skeins that I'm going to do. I'm going to do them one at a time so you can kind of see what's going on without me moving too much around. I might narrate a little bit. I might just do time lapses. So if you have any questions about anything, definitely let me know and I'll answer them in a future video. I will say this will not be a dye tutorial. It's really just a come dye with me, let's play with color and see what happens. And again, if you have questions, you can let me know. I'll try to use some different techniques throughout the different videos so you can kind of just see how they play, but I've done other dye videos and I plan to do more in the future, so if I stick to kind of the same style today, you'll definitely see more in the future. So let me know if there's more you want to see. And let's get to dyeing since the water's heated up. You'll also see, well, maybe you can't quite see, but I have knitting because I usually knit while I am waiting for dyes to set. So always have your knitting nearby when you're dyeing. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so I don't know if you can see, but that water is steaming, so it is perfect. And we're gonna get a skein in there. I mentioned earlier that I might show different techniques. So one of the techniques is I could put, so you can see this is clear water. I could put dye in here and make it more like a dye bath. I do that sometimes, particularly with probably some tonal colors. But today I'm gonna, maybe I'll do one like that a little bit later on. But today I might not. Dye baths aren't necessarily my favorite technique. You get less control over where the water or where the dyes go. So a lot of times I do it like this. Again, I am not by any means an expert. This is what I do. This is what works for me. And so, we're just having some fun here. I have no plans, and sorry, I'm gonna just wait for the skein itself to heat up. You'll see that I have these kind of big gloves. They're actually waterproof, but they're also heat resistant. A lot of times I tend to just get in there with my hands, and simple rubber gloves definitely don't protect you from the heat. So again, even now I'm just like picking it up in the hot water. So it's nice to just kind of get in there sometimes. So again, I have really no plans of what I'm doing here. Like I mentioned, I have some newer colors that I really want to try out and see what they look like and see how a lot play together, see how they play with some of my older dyes, and we'll kind of just go from there. So this is one that's never been opened, so let's definitely see how this works. So again, there are multiple techniques. This is typically what you're gonna see is what I typically do. I have these little teaspoons, and then I have tea strainers, and I put dye into the tea strainer and then just kind of speckle it on top. And then sometimes I do what I call a speckle and smush, which you'll see where you speckle it and then I kind of just kind of push it in and let the water get in so it blends a little bit more. Whereas when I just speckle on top and leave, that's kind of what you think of speckling, where you leave kind of the dots. I do wear a mask. I'm also wearing safety goggles. I wear safety goggles because I have had water shoot out at me before, so the goggles are now part of the system. Again, so I may and I think I just hit the mic, I may talk and not talk, and a lot of that will just be when I want my mask on. I'm not going to be talking as much because it probably won't sound very good. But I have a new color here that I'm going to see how it works. I have the yarn just kind of laid around, so I'm just going to randomly put it on top and then kind of go from there. So a lot of times with colors, and you can see there I kind of speckled it, because some of the yarn is underneath the water, so like in here it kind of blended into the water and it'll be less speckled. Here all of this is above the water, so the dye kind of just sits on top and it'll just kind of stay speckled. When I talk about speckling and smushing, what happens is I can take these dyes and just kind of make them blend into the water a little bit more. So you can see this color, it's a red. It looks like it could be kind of more pink in some areas, but we'll see how that works and kind of go from there. So when dyers talk about layers, this is kind of like a layer, right? So I did one color, and what I can do is, which I don't think I want to do in this one, but I'll show you in other ones, is a lot of times I'll pick up the skein and just kind of blend the colors in a little bit more. But sometimes like this, I kind of like how this came out where it's a little speckly and a little bit bleeding. So a lot of times I just will put the lid back on and let it sit to make sure some of those speckles actually stay, and go from there. So this is where I take a 2-minute knitting break, let that sit, and then I will move it around and add the next layer. You can kind of tell when the dye set, because if you start to kind of smush them, they won't bleed. This is still bleeding a little bit. Red takes a while to set, but I'm okay with it. So again, you can kind of see, you know, because I did it randomly, we kind of get random colors. And so a lot of times what I do when I'm doing these more variegated skeins is I just take it out of the pan, and then I just kind of repile it up, and then I do my color on top, and that just helps to keep it from becoming like a striping variegation. A lot of times you see dyers where the skeins are pretty straight and they do dyes across, and that's kind of where you get the more pooling colorways, whereas if you do it randomly like this, you'll not get pooling as much. So I'm going to pick out another color that I'm going to do on top, and I'm putting away this first color that I used. And again, red can take a while to set, and if you're a knitter, or a crocheter, if you use hand-dyed yarn, you probably have seen red dyes can bleed a little bit, and that's just kind of part of the process. So it is nice to get the reds in there first because they'll spend more time setting. Typically a lot of my colors I end up letting them, once I'm done, I take them off the heat. I have a bunch of these pans and I let them continue to sit in the hot water and let it cool for quite a few hours, just to make sure it finishes setting. So right now I am just getting out another colorway. So I think this is more of a blue, and I did use this on some mystery minis that I dyed up when I first got these dyes in the mail. I did a whole bunch of mystery minis just to see what they all looked like, and so I remember saying this was like one of my favorites and was going to become one of my new favorites. So this might be like a 4th of July themed color, or maybe it's a little blue. But again, you can see here the skein is above the water, so you can see a lot of this is not bleeding, it's more speckled. But if I start tapping on it, that's kind of where you get that blended look. So for this color, I'm gonna do that. It looks like the speckles are kind of staying a little bit more green, but once I blend it in, that's where they become a little bit more of that blue. So this is a fun 4th of July themed skein. And again, you can see some of the dyes bled into the water. That's fine, it's just gonna blend in a little bit. And you will see at the end, the water does stay clear. The dyes do all get absorbed. If they don't, there's excess dye. Sometimes it happens where, you know, you have excess dye, and that's when you just wanna rinse it a lot and make sure that the dyes really are set. So that is that color. And then I also got out another one that I might just do along with this and see how that looks. Okay, so I am calling this one done. Not sure how well you can see it. It's a very colorful variegated skein, but there are some white parts still there. So I will show this later when it's done, but I am calling this one done. There are some white bits left, which I like, and again is a big part of dyeing it this way. So I'm going to show you guys one with a dye bath, which gives it a nice base layer. And then I think in the third skein, I'm going to do a similar technique to what I just did, but not have any white. So I'll show you how you can get a good base without doing it this way. Since I did a lot of speckling, I wanted to keep the color separate. There is still some white, which I think is a lot of fun because of how colorful this is. And I think you guys are going to love how this dries. So that one is done. So I'm actually going to do this again so you guys can see this. So I have that neutral color on there. I'm going to take the yarn out, and you guys, again, you can't really see it of course, but the water is clear again, so that worked. But let me put a brighter, and this isn't too bright, so it'll stay pretty light. But now you guys can at least see that dye bath a little bit better. Okay, so you can see the pink in there now. And I'm going to just dip this in. So again, you'll see I can dip it in and take it out, and you start to see the pink on the yarn. So dip it in and take it out. So this is another way I can do it. I can also just pile it in, and what's in the water is what will soak up the yarn, which I think is what I'm gonna do. Just going to move it around just a little bit more. So now what happens is I have that like neutral off-white color, but I also have pink, and so that'll be a really fun base color. And again, I'm gonna leave some of this yarn out of the water, and when I take the lid off later, what you'll be able to see is the water will be clear again, and then just underneath will kind of have soaked in a lot of that pink. So a lot of the pink got absorbed on the top here that you can see, but then the underneath will get a lot of it, pretty much what's remaining in the water. All right, so now you can see that water is clear. It's no longer pink. So all the dye got absorbed, and this is where you'll start to see some of the yarn that was on the bottom got kind of that darker pink in there. So you get some good variegation just from leaving some of the yarn out of the pot. So I'm going to time lapse now for the rest of it. I'm gonna just add some more layers of other colors, and you can watch me do that. Okay, so pan number 3, or skein number 3. So I have the skein in there already. I said this before, but I was gonna do another one where I didn't use a dye bath and I just put it directly in. But I would have less white than I did in the first skein. And you can see, or maybe not, but there's a higher water level in here, meaning that when I put the dyes on, it'll bleed into the water, and then that's when we'll get kind of less white and more blended in colors. So again, I'm gonna time lapse this one and then kind of talk about it at the end. So I fibbed a little bit when I said I had no idea what I was going to do with this one. If you know my spring rainbow gradient, I have a blue-green in there, and so I love that color in that gradient, and so I wanted to play around with that quite a little bit. If I did a main color with a blue-green base, I probably would have made a dye bath or mixed it in a bottle and sprayed it on top, but With this one, I decided to just do it the way I was doing it. You can see in this skein, again, I don't have my gloves on, but there's really no white. It's all a base color, and the way I did that was not letting the dye sit. I moved the skein around a lot, I moved the dye around a lot, and so there's really no white left. So I'm gonna fast forward here. I'm gonna add a couple more layers. I have some ideas of what I'm gonna do, and we'll see what it looks like at the end. We're kind of finding this out together. Okay, so you guys can see some of this is like variegated and more blended, and then over here we have some more speckles. And what I do is I just kind of poke at them, and if they bleed, then they're not quite set yet, and if they stay where they are, then they are set. These ones actually are, so they are not bleeding. So I'm gonna move this skein around a little bit and just decide if it's done or not. You can see again, I had that blue-green base, and then I just added some more colors on top. So I added like a darker, oh no, I definitely need more. I added a darker green, a darker blue, and then actually kind of like a, I just never know what to call it, like a rosy purple color. So I'm gonna add a little bit more of those on there, and again, I'm just gonna do a little bit of each. I don't want too much on there, but I do want more than I had. If you hear the clicking, well, you can probably see it. The clicking is just me hitting the tea strainer. So I'm just gonna speckle some more of the green, the deep green and the deep blue. So these are different colors than I used for the base color, and just kind of hit up on some of those areas that didn't have a lot. One thing that you learn when you're dyeing, and you get more comfortable with how much dye to use. And so if you look like at one of these speckles, which I don't know how well you can see it, but one speckle like that, if you think about knitting, first of all, I have multiple, I have multiple strands of the yarn here, and so if you look at one individually, like one speckle is barely going to show in someone's knitting. So it's okay to pile it up like that. That will still speckle. And so that's something that you kind of learn and get used to, especially as you knit or crochet with your hand-dyed yarn. You kind of see that. So you can't think about it like, oh, there's like a huge clump there now, because I also have like a whole skein there. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind as well. If you want speckles to really show, you need to use dye. You need to use kind of some of it up. So that's kind of a tip. And I'm just adding some of this like rose color. And you see it's like very bunched up now, but when you spread out the yarn too, you'll see a lot of the green blue base is still there. So I think this will be it. I'm gonna put the pan lid back on. I'm actually gonna move it off the stove and clean up because we are now done. And then just remember that these will be listed in my shop probably by the time you see this video. They will be listed in my shop as one of a kind. So just make sure you go to the BFL section, because these were all my BFL sock base. And sorry, I'm cleaning up and I realize I'm probably being loud, but and you can shop for them there. Hey everyone, so I am cutting in here to just show you guys what I am working on while I'm dyeing. So when I put the lid on and I let the dye set, I turn around and I work on some knitting. Sometimes I'm editing videos while I'm dyeing, sometimes I'm dyeing more colors than I can handle at a time, and so this doesn't always happen, but since I was doing one color at a time and I was filming, I did do some knitting while I was working on it. So if you're new to my channel, I do post weekly or every other week videos about my knitting projects. I try to keep my channel more like kind of this dye with me video where it's more vlog style, so I'll do videos, day in the life videos, I'll do kind of behind the scenes of my Etsy shop, I'll do project highlights, or if I'm planning a project, I'll kind of talk it out loud. I've done a cast on party where I was just sitting and chatting while I cast on different projects. So if that's something you're into, definitely subscribe. I'm going to try to keep doing these dye with me videos, but there's other things to offer as well. So this, and if you have been around my channel before, you've seen this a million times. This is my Drakenfell shawl. I am currently binding it off. So this has an I-cord bind off, and I actually started this bind off when I started dyeing today. So I got all of this done during that little dye session we did, which is quite a bit. I don't think I'm quite halfway, but maybe now I'm halfway. And yeah, so I am hoping to get this bound off today, so look for a Faux Friday post probably this week. Hey everyone, it is now later in the day and the skeins are dry, and so I wanted to show you what we made. So here they are. So I have the lights on overhead because it is later and we had a thunderstorm all day, so it's dark. But anyway, this is the first skein we did, which we started with some of this red, and we really just speckled a lot of the colors on top. And so I can show it to you laid out. And so here it is. So you see, again, we had some of that red that bled, and then we put some blues and purples and some other colors on there. And this was the one that we had a lot of white left over. So you do see some of that white, of course, but again, when it was skeined up, you saw just kind of how colorful it was. Okay, so again, this is the second skein, and we did first a layer of that natural color, and then we layered on some of the pink, so we get a good variegation. And then I kind of speckled in some of the brighter pinks and some of these browns and beiges. So that is how that one came out. Again, you can see kind of those speckles of pinks we did on there and the different tones. So that was number 2. Okay, and then this was the last one that we did. So this is the one where we didn't do a dye bath, but we just kind of made a green blue base on it with the two different greens and blues. And then I just speckled on some of the dark blue, some dark green, and then that rose color on there, which kind of turned out a little brown, which again looks really nice. So that's the colorway that we did, a similar technique to this one, but if you remember, for this one we moved the yarn around and the dyes around, so it didn't come out quite as speckled and variegated as this one. We kind of got a more tonal base, and then we added some layers on top. So we did all these, again, all a little bit different, but I love how they all came out. I might use some of them as influence for future colorways, but these are one-of-a-kind skeins. Again, they're just the one available, and they're now listed in the shop. So go check them out at agirlandherwool.com. And thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, definitely let me know. If you like this kind of content, then definitely let me know that as well. I still plan on doing more dye with me's, but it's always good to hear what people like to see and not see, and this is it, just not wound up. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.